In the world of medicine, where every decision can change lives, your peace of mind is crucial. This is where Pattern steps in. Imagine insurance made simple, fast, and personalized, just for you. With Pattern, you're not just getting disability and life insurance, you're insuring your future and protecting your greatest asset, your income. In the past 10 years, Pattern has transformed the way over 20,000 doctors secure their financial well-being. Discover the simplicity of securing your future at patternlife.com or click the link in the description. Are you building a small business or thinking about it? Learn how this physician built his love for teaching people how to chart efficiently into a six-figure business. Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. Welcome back to the podcast. We have a recurring character on the show today. We have Dr. Junaid Niazi. So we had him back on the show a while ago to talk about how to chart better, and we got tons of great feedback on that. We've got a lot of people that are actually getting home sooner because of that one episode. And so we had him back on the show, and he had someone that he did basically as like a case live on the show, recorded it, him coaching her through how she could chart better and get home sooner. And now we have him back on the show to talk about really how he's built his business around this very niche that he's got, very small niche that he's got. So Dr. Junaid Niazi, he's a board certified internist and pediatrician who works as a primary care physician for a large healthcare organization in the upper Midwest. And part of his time is spent as information services medical director, working on optimizing the EHR, which is, how he dipped his toe into that space. And actually, as of October 23rd, his primary care group is now the largest private sector union in the country, and he serves on the bargaining committee, wearing a lot of hats. In addition to the above roles, he is also a physician life coach, the entrepreneur behind Prosperous Life MD, where he coaches physicians on all things wellness, productivity, business, and careers. And he runs a group coaching program called Charting Conquered, where he helps physicians complete our charting at work, and has helped over 400 physicians and advanced practice providers reclaim their time. I'm reclaiming my time. Reclaim their time at home for themselves. So Dr. Niazi, thank you so much for being on the podcast again.
Well, thanks for having me back.
So let's get right into it, right? We've talked to you on the show about how to chart more efficiently, and you've done that other episode, but give us a quick version of how you even got into that space.
Yeah, well, I was a coach for another physician, Dr. Jimmy Turner, the physician philosopher, in his group coaching program. And what I noticed, or more correctly, what he noticed on those coaching calls was anytime something came up about clinic workflows, efficiency, I was always the guy chiming in the chat or telling people to just email me and I'll help them out. And I didn't actually realize it at the time that that's what I was doing. He challenged me on one of the calls to say, you should put a training on for my clients. And he named a sort of a time and a day. And I was like, okay, well, now I need to do this. That's really how it came to be, right? Like I did that training and I was like, oh, this could potentially be a niche.
So that's funny. Jimmy saw it in you before you even saw it in yourself. I think that's a pretty good sale for coaching right there. You're really making an excellent point about how coaching can be so advantageous. Someone else can see the potential in you more so than you even see it in yourself.
Well, we're so caught up in our own inner brain dialogue so much of the time that it's hard to see sometimes what we're good at. And you maybe have done exercises or been asked like, hey, what would your friends say about you? Just to get you out of that headspace to thinking about what would other people say about you. It's like that. Like, he could see me and see a recurring pattern in something that I was doing that it was so rote for me that I couldn't even recognize that was something that I was providing or doing.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. So that was how you decided that there was a business there, right? Like once you were doing it for other people and it came naturally, like, wait a second, I can actually sell this service.
Yeah. Well, he put me up to that challenge. I did the training and it was, so he just set a time and a date and he invited his clients to join, and I went through a sort of a presentation and then brought some of them on to coach them on sort of how to be more efficient in clinic and what was really tripping them up. And it was, a pretty resounding success. Like one person had just messaged me this was on a Sunday. And so on Monday, the next day, they said, "Hey, I just left clinic 3 hours earlier." And I was like, okay, yeah. In hindsight, everything is so much clearer, right? So upon reflection, this was a problem, a challenge that I had actually sought to overcome in my early years of practice. I would just did that for myself, obviously, because I just wanted to get out of work sooner and enjoy my time at home. At the time, I didn't think that that was going to be a business idea. Entrepreneurship was probably the last thing on my mind. It was just having more free time. But now recognizing like, oh, hey, like, let me just sit back, think about all these things that I do and have done. How can I share that with people? And I'd now just gone through coach training as well. So I had that piece of it. And I was like, well, I'm at least several steps ahead of so many people that struggle with this huge pain point. This makes complete sense. This is very natural. And as you mentioned in the intro, I'm an information services medical director. So I'm working with our EHR on a weekly basis, trying to make it does give you some street cred. Yeah. It tends to lend itself to have the tomatoes thrown at you if something goes wrong.
Yes. Yeah. That definitely happens to us too. Was that the extent of your market research? Like you did this and you were like, it worked, people loved it. So you were like, let's turn it into a business. Or was there more market research? You're like, let me see if there's really a market there for something that I can sell.
That was it in terms of anything formal. Again, on reflection, when I was like, well, this was a huge pain point for me that it was sort of almost a singular focus to improve my charting coming out of residency. And it was something my wife struggled with. She's a pediatrician, outpatient pediatrician. Almost all my friends from residency that went into primary care or a clinic-based specialty were struggling with. It was commented on in countless online communities and groups. So it was almost like
find someone who intuitively just doesn't struggle with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was almost like you had that light bulb moment, and then all those disparate situations or people's experiences suddenly come into almost a singular focus. And you're like, oh, wow, this is a huge problem. I could be someone's oasis in the desert, so to speak, right? Like in the business world, you want an offer that is so enticing. Someone has such a bad problem that, maybe my oasis is, the River Seine or something at the Olympics. And in normal circumstances, no one will even wants to swim in that thing. But if their pain point is high enough, they're going to do it.
They're in the desert. Yeah. Makes sense. Was there ever any imposter syndrome where you were like, maybe I don't know enough to do this? Maybe, I'm not expert enough, right? We always encounter that in medicine. Did you encounter that in building your business?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing when I first started. I had to basically learn a new lexicon. There's all these steps you have to take when you're starting a business. Did I 100% do them out of order? Just about everybody else? Yes. Despite having multiple people tell me the order, I still somehow, fudged it up. And in terms of imposter syndrome, yeah, it's so built into us to be experts in our field and to rely on other experts, right? And to have an evidence base for things. In order to have an evidence base, though, there has to be prior experience. When you're launching something like this on your own, you don't have your own prior experience to go off of. So yeah, the imposterism was rampant. Like, who am I to even think that I could help other physicians with this thing just because I was successful? That was me doing my own thing. Is that translatable? Think of when we read a research paper, is this applicable to can I generalize this result to others? So there was, a ton of imposterism, but I think at the same time,
see one, do one, teach one, right? Is one of the tenets of medical education. So
it
you
is.
saw it, you did it, and now you're teaching it, right? There's also that aspect to it. I mean, yes, now in hindsight, but as you're like, people really gonna pay me to do this? I just figured it out for myself. How am I gonna? Yes, you had the two, the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other.
Well, I mean, that was one big hindrance for me initially was if I really think this thing can truly help other physicians, is it something I should even charge for? And just from talking to so many other people and my own experience, when I get free things, they just get put in the free locker in my brain that is just, full of thousands of things that I never actually go and do. Whereas the things that I had actually invested in, either, time, energy, or money, were the ones where I actually put my focus and saw results. And I've received some flack over the years for, well, if this is so true, why aren't you helping your fellow physician out of the goodness of your heart? And I mean, I do that. I have a blog. I've written so much. I do these podcast episodes where I share things. And for folks to actually have that transformation, they have to put a little bit in, right? They have to
What I
give
would say to
something.
those people is bite me. Like the fact that you have to give up, like you took the time to figure it out to help yourself. The fact that other people you should just be giving that away for free. No, who gives everything away for free? Are you a monk? Like where you're like taking all, no, your time has value. And if they're telling you that you should be giving it away for free, what they're telling you that your time does not have value.
Unfortunately, that I
expertise
agree with
has
you.
value.
I agree with you. Unfortunately, I think that's rampant in the medical community because, I mean, I think
Right.
the whole premise of academic medicine, well, you're going to earn half of what your colleagues in private practice or community practice earn, but you're doing the right thing. And it's so
Well, I will push
inculcated
back
in
on
us,
that.
right?
Does that mean I'm in private practice? Does that mean I'm doing the wrong thing?
Yeah, you're
If
a
they're doing
horrible
the right thing,
person.
does
We
that mean
we
I'm
all
doing-
know
we
that,
both
Brad.
have our roles. Both
Yeah.
have our roles. It's the end of another busy day. You just saw 20, 30 patients, maybe more. Instead of heading home for dinner with your spouse or playing with your kids, you now begin your night job, charting. Charting is critical for patient care, billing, and medical legal liability, but it steals our focus from our patients, eats away at our time with our families, and keeps us up at night. The burden of always having another chart to complete drains all of us. Freed listens, prepares your notes, and writes patient instructions for you. Charting is done before your patient walks out of the room. Wait, because it gets better. Freed learns your style over time. It's AI, just like a human scribe would, except it will never quit on you. Freed is loved by 3,000 plus clinicians from every specialty. It's HIPAA compliant, takes 30 seconds to learn, and costs only $99 a month. You can try Freed for free right now by going to freed.ai, Freed.ai. Listeners of the Physician's Guide to Doctoring can use the code PGD50 for $50 off the first month.
Just playing off that just for a second, though, like even when I was looking for a job, there were no academic jobs when I finished training, and I felt like a failure. Like there was no academic jobs in my immediate area, and I wanted to stay here.
Right.
And so I had to go apply in the community, and it was like the wild, wild west. And I literally felt like I was letting all my mentors and attendings down, that I had to look for a community job. And then the moment I got out there and started working, I was taking care of patients, which is like what I signed up to do in the first place. And then I reflected on it and I was like, what percentage of us are in academic jobs versus community? And like, the overwhelming majority of us are caring for our patients in community settings, not in the big academic centers. Yeah, maybe the more rare cases or the tougher things end up getting funneled there. But, the bulk of the groundwork, so to speak, is being done by us.
So we're here to talk about your business, but since we've decided to take this little side road, I actually just had this conversation with my therapist about the fact that I'm a private practice otolaryngologist who
Mhm.
doesn't do very complicated surgeries. The complicated, in the New York metro area, we've got huge academic centers where they do tons of head and neck cancer and complex ear cases and complex pediatric airway. So the fact that I don't do this stuff that I was trained to do in residency makes me feel like I'm a disappointment to the people who
Right.
trained me. But that's not my job. I also see tons of, the volume that I see is extremely high, and then I can funnel those patients effectively to the places that they need to go if they have something complicated, dangerous, along those lines. Am I any less of a physician because this is what I've chosen to do in my practice? And my thought has always been yes.
Mhm.
Yes, I am. And so I had to do some work on that in therapy. But no, there's a role for the academic physician. There's a role for the community physician. We both
Right.
serve our patients. We're both doing the best we can and trying to help them. But back to the original point, we're not doing that for free. We're getting paid to do work. We need to pay our bills. We've trained. We sacrifice a lot. It takes a toll on us, what we do. We worry
Yeah.
about our patients after we go, after we get home.
Yeah.
We take risks by every patient that we see could have an adverse outcome that they're all potentially ticking time bombs, and we're willing to take that on. So we should be, compensated fairly for it, and you should be compensated for your time. So let's get back into that building of the business? Because you had
Yeah.
mentioned some missteps that you took at the beginning of the business. And so that's what I want to be the focus of this episode, is so that people that are building want to build a business in a similar way. So let's talk about that. What were the steps that you did take, and what were the mistakes you made?
So, I mean, the things I did correctly, but probably out of order, and again, just because I'd asked so many people how to do this, was there's a lot of the logistical stuff, right? So, hey, I want to do this. I need to effectively separate what I'm going to do as a business enterprise from my personal and family thing. You need to keep all those things nice and separate. You're like, okay, well, I should probably get a business, checking account or bank account. Well, right. But what do you need to set one of those up? You need an address for your business. You're like, oh, okay. You need a EIN, employer identification number, which is like the social security number for a business. You're like, okay. So then you start looking at those things. So the EIN is pretty easy to get online. Quick point, if the link you click on is asking you to pay money to get your EIN, it is another company that is masquerading as the IRS. Don't do that. That was a mistake I made, but I immediately called them like 2 minutes later. I was like, wait, why did you just charge me money for this? And they're like, oh, sorry, don't report us. So EINs are free. And then set up a business address. Now, you can't use a PO box. Most banks and other things will not count that as a valid address. So you had to find, I think I ended up using a UPS mailbox because it looks a little less like a PO box. Then the whole
Use your home address.
unofficial things, no. For like billing and credit card stuff, it ended up that I had to, but that's not forward facing to other people.
Okay,
That
just
makes
because you
sense.
don't want people to know your home address in case they have a negative charting experience.
It just made sense. And that's just sort of my personality, is keep those, try to keep my kids off social media, try to keep my address off the internet.
So you didn't use a lawyer for that? Because anytime I've opened up an LLC, anytime, like I've done it that many times, we've just used a lawyer for that. But you're saying you did this yourself.
I started to, and then I got one of those sort of online legal Zoom, Rocket Lawyers who I used. But still, you have to do a bunch of the work yourself, right? It's the same like when you file taxes and you hire CPA. 90% of the work is you just collecting all the information. So it's a similar thing. And then, I had to file, or they filed, but I had to, again, give them all the information, articles of organization for your business in your state, things like that. You get a fancy certificate from your Secretary of State that you're forming a business. And then I wasted like 8 months trying to make a website because I figured I should have.
Do it yourself.
Oh, yeah. Part of it was useful because I was able to really figure out what my messaging and themes were. And this was sort of, honestly, I mean, some of this I'd started before I even found my niche as a charting coach. So a lot of this was focused on wellness and financial coaching and such. But I didn't even need a website, honestly, at that point. So that was sort of a complete waste of 8 months. I tell myself it helped me formulate like my message and help me get organized in my head. And I think that's partly true, but I could have probably done that in like a week and not 8 months. So that was just kind of a misstep, if you will.
I'm always a fan of outsourcing.
Yeah.
Like you've got someone on Fiverr or whatever that builds websites all the time, or like somebody's cousin or kid that just like they're savvy and they can't bill like a doctor, right? Like your whole thing is get home early. So you're getting home early and then spending your time building a website, right? Like that seems completely in opposition. Like why wouldn't you just be like, all right, I'm going to outsource this and hire someone else?
Yeah. I mean, again, that's one of those initial mistakes because I was still struggling with a lot of the mindset stuff, right? Like if you want it done right, do it yourself. That was still a big piece of starting a business. Plus, honestly, for me, one of the reasons I like to pursue entrepreneurship is tapping into that creative experience. And for me, there's fun in brainstorming and, thinking up cool ideas and ways of doing things. But there's also some fun for me for getting into the nitty gritty of it. I still enjoy tinkering from time to time.
So you had said before that, like, there were some people that thought you should be doing it for free and, their imposter syndrome. Should I even be teaching people this? So then how did you figure out how much you could charge? It doesn't seem like there's really much precedent for this, right? Like, oh, let's see what the market is, right? Like, how much is a Snickers bar at the 7-Eleven? Like, you can't do that. So where do you begin with something like that?
Yeah, usually you start with a number that feels safe to you, which is usually some ridiculously low number. And then you just start to tell yourself, what would make this worthwhile for me to have to put hours and hours into creating it. Because even if I'm delegating, say I had a team of VAs, which at that time, which I did not, I was a one-man show at the time. That's person hours I need to put into creating this, figuring out, learning about all this stuff to get it all uploaded and designed and make sure all the tech works. So I just, I really had to sit with myself and say, like, what's that going to be worth of, in a dual physician household, 2 little kids. Right now, time with my little kids is so much more valuable. Where the trade-off there could be is if I could then scale back on clinical hours and have another source of income. And that's sort of where I was thinking. So I said, well, what would make sense? Plus, I was offering CME for my program, and that's a huge expense, at least through like traditional CME avenues. There's a couple of so-called disruptors in the space now, but at that time, I didn't know of them. So that was a huge expense you have to pay sort of upfront.
So the calculus wasn't how much is it going to be worth to my clients? The calculus was how much is it worth to me to be willing to take this time? So that's where you started, because if it's not going to be worth your time, it doesn't make sense to do it.
Right. Well, you can have, you could do a lower cost product that you then have to market more and bring more leads and more traffic and have to sell at scale, or you can do a higher kind of touch point, more involved. We offer not just a course, but group coaching where I'm coaching, technically it's one-on-one coaching, but other people are just sort of in the periphery. And, that's directly, and that's evening time, right? So that's really precious to everybody involved, me and the clients. And so I did have to think like, well, what's going to be worth me doing that? Because I don't want to start something that I'm then going to resent because it's now eating up all of my time or too much of that time that I want.
Then how were you able to scale? So explain to me how the business works. And then I think I'm going to understand a little better on how you scale.
Yeah. So the offer is essentially a online course released weekly over 6 weeks, coupled with a weekly group coaching call with just that cohort. It's obviously shifted and mutated over the 3 years that I've been doing this, but the current form is there's this dedicated 6-week block of time where you get to go through these sort of bite-sized videos that really there's, me sharing some best practice stuff that I've sort of come up with, but a lot of it's to get people just thinking about like, hey, this is my situation. Where can I apply an idea like this into my workflows to get something out of it? So it's that kind of training along with these group coaching calls and then written coaching in the form of a Facebook community. After that 6-week, sort of a little more intensive period, they then sort of become an alumni of the program. They fall in the alumni program, and that's regular, at least 2 or 3 times a month, group coaching calls. We also have co-working sessions where people can just come on, get on camera, have an accountability partner, keep going. And, if they want, I've slowly hired some physician coaches to be part of my team. And so I can even leverage their time to help with some one-on-one coaching since they know my system and everything as well now too. So that's the program in a nutshell.
Well, now would be a good opportunity to talk about the program offering.
Sure. Well, leading into that program that I just described is a free training I put on. It's called Leave Your Work at Work. And it's where I go over basically the framework as I sort of put everything together. And I said, how can I make this a system where people can apply their situation? Because I'm not you. I'm not Dr. Bradley Block in an ENT practice in a different time zone. I don't know what your support staff is like unless you tell me. I don't know what your EHR is like unless you tell me all this stuff. So how can I give you a framework that you can start thinking about? If I do this, if I leverage these things, if I start thinking about how I use my time in clinic a little differently, what's going to open up for me? And so that's what I really try to do with this, going over this framework. This training, Leave Your Work at Work, is going to be on Wednesday, August 14th at 7 p.m. Central Time. There'll be a replay for a couple of days afterwards. I do on the training introduce my Chart and Conquered program and how people can join us in that afterwards. But I've got tons of people that just come to the training and there's some people who've benefited enough from the training that they don't actually need my program. And that's great. That's fantastic. I mean, that's filling the mission.
Some of them are going to turn into evangelists. They'd be like,
right?
All I had to do was this, and it changed my life. And then they're going to tell their friends.
Yeah.
And their colleagues. All right. So if you were starting from scratch again, this is going to be the parting question, right? If you were starting from scratch again, building this business, knowing what you knew in hindsight, you had access to Junaid from 3 years ago. What would you tell him to do differently? And don't make it a mindset thing. I don't want to hear about mindset. I want to hear like brass tacks, like, oh, I would have hired a lawyer earlier, or I would have, charged more. Like, what would you tell Junaid from 3 years ago?
Well, this one's easy. We touched upon it already. It would be get out of your own damn way and hire other people to do all these other tasks for you.
Outsource. So how do you find those people?
Most of my virtual assistants, and I hired multiple, not because I'm super busy or anything like that. I just wanted, one lesson I learned was if one person is out sick or they suddenly drop off the face of the earth or whatever, you're just left high and dry and you have to do all that work again yourself. So I started by hiring most recently two virtual assistants from the Philippines. And so there's certain websites you can go to find them. And you just have to be, again, maybe this is another framework we could go over at some point, but you're going to get hundreds, if not thousands of people just blast replying to all these job opportunities. So you have to put something in there that it's like a test, like, hey, have you actually read this far? Do this one thing, go here. And then you can sort of test people and vet them in that way. And it takes the numbers down considerably from hundreds to thousands to like 5. But these people at least they're attentive to detail.
Like copy and paste a smiley emoji at the end, like after you type your name.
Right.
Something simple like that. And if there's no smiley emoji.
Yeah. And then, have an onboarding process. Again, I can't just be like, this is my brain. You take this and now go do stuff, right? Like that takes years of building, rapport and someone getting used to working with you. So you actually have to lay stuff out for them. And first month is usually, I'm going to show you how to do this thing, and then you're going to do it. You're going to copy it exactly and send it back to me. And then right after that, it's going to be like, now it's your turn to try to do it, but I'm going to review everything that you do. You're demonstrating you're having competence in this area. And then to show me that you have mastery is you get through those stages, and then I'm going to let you do it. And then I might review it superficially, but I'm not going to go into the weeds. And I'm just going to look at the final product when it comes out and then be like, oh, should have reviewed that, or no, you did a great job. And that's how you sort of demonstrate mastery. But it's really hard, again, to sort of let go, especially a lot of us look at a business like it's our baby. And what does a baby need, right? A baby needs 24/7 attention, and you don't want your business to be like that. You need that village to help you nurture this virtual baby. This analogy is falling apart, but you need a village.
Yes. It still works. It still works. All right. Well, so if people want to find your course, or they just want to like what they heard, they want to follow Prosperous Life MD, where do we find you online?
Yeah, the best place is Instagram. So Prosperous Life MD is my handle there. If they want to sign up for this training that I mentioned earlier, the Leave Your Work at Work training, you can just go to leaveyourworkatwork.com. And those are probably the two best places to find me right now.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Dr. Junaid Niazi, thank you so much for your time, for conquering charts for us and for our colleagues. And I know, again, I get home a lot earlier because of you. So thank you for what you're doing.
Glad to hear it.
Profession.
All right. Well, thank you for having me again, Brad.
Doctors dedicate our lives to caring for others. It's time someone took care of us. Visit patternlife.com to simplify your path to peace of mind. Patternlife.com, simplifying your insurance journey. Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means you either fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please share it, or like it, or comment on a social media post, or write us a 5-star review, something. It would really help me out. And maybe what you learned from this episode can help someone else too. The views expressed in this episode are those of the interviewer and interviewee and don't represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting make it sound like I'm talking directly to you. This is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice or financial advice or really any advice. Thanks again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.